Hello everyone, my name is Twisted Coaster Fan and welcome to my first ever video for this new channel. Having been long gone from making videos, I realized that after visiting so many parks since I deleted my channel back in 2022 that I miss making content. So I'm back with some more videos cooking up. So I figured, what would be a good way to start this channel? What would be a good first video to make? I wondered that for quite a while. At first, I wanted to make a ranking video highlighting every new coaster that I rode in the year from 2023 to 2024, but then I realized that would take too much time and it would be like a 2-hour video, and I don't think any of you guys would want to see that. However, recently I got an invitation from a friend to visit Six Flags St. Louis in 2 weeks. Of course, I happily accepted, but that got me to realize there's some pretty bad roller coasters at that park. And rather than focusing on them specifically, that got me thinking, why don't I make a video talking about my least favorite coasters, period? I mean, I've done it before and people seem to like it, so why not open my channel with that? It just seems too perfect to be true. So that's where this video comes in. I will be ranking the 10 worst coasters that I have ever ridden. Now, do keep in mind this is just my opinion, and I haven't ridden all of these coasters super recently. I'll clarify which ones I have a fresh memory on and which ones I don't. But yeah, just know that my experience may differ from yours, and that's okay. So with that, let's get right into this horrible, horrible list, shall we?
Disappointment in the game of life!
Oh boy, it's time to talk about the first defunct attraction on this list. It's Tidal Twister at SeaWorld San Diego. Now, for those who don't know, I rode this about 3 times in its opening year, and I haven't since then, as I haven't visited SeaWorld San Diego since then. And of course, this ride is now dead, and rightfully so. This was just a failure of a coaster that really makes me wonder how Skyline Attractions gets any business to begin with. I'm sure the folks over there are very nice people, but in terms of the rides they make, yeah, no. They've had quite a few L's to say the least. Now, when I first wrote this, I thought it wasn't great, but it was tolerable. However, I wrote it a few months later, and I think that first ride, I was just really happy to get the credit, so maybe I was more forgiving than I usually was, because upon re-ride, I really didn't like this ride, and yeah, it kinda sucked. Despite having the RMC single rail track, which is butter smooth on both Railblazer and Wonder Woman Flight of Courage, somehow is abhorrently rough on this ride, on top of the layout being dull and repetitive as it's just a 0G roll in an Airtime Thrills over and over again. It just shakes, bangs your head around, and it's just a terrible ride. The only reason why this thing isn't even higher is the fact that the restraints are super comfortable, so the headbanging isn't nearly as bad as it could be. Otherwise, this thing would have easily been in my bottom 3. Easily. Even with the good restraints, this coaster still ranks in my bottom 10. That's how bad this ride was. I'm very glad it's gone, and I don't miss it at all.
Disappointment in the game of life!
Next up at number 9 is a coaster at Six Flags St. Louis. One of many, actually. And this is the Ninja. And oh boy, this has got to be one of the most infamous and most hated coasters out there. I mean, seriously, people treat this ride as if it's the worst coaster ever made. And while I personally don't think it was that bad, I can't deny that this is a pretty bad coaster to say the least. Now, I'm sure you're all wondering why this thing's only at number 9. Well, truth be told, I actually did like certain aspects of the ride. The first drop was kind of fun, and the inversions were not too shabby. I liked the vertical loop, it was pretty forceful, and the corkscrews, they were fine. They were pretty solid. The Sidewinder after the vertical loop, though? Yeah, no, that thing gets my full wrath. It is an awful inversion that gives you a nice smack to the head. I mean, good God, this is easily one of the worst inversions I've ever experienced in my entire life. And then the other problem with this ride, the turns. Holy crap, this coaster has some of the worst transitions I've ever experienced on any coaster. They're so painful and so rough that you're going to want off sooner rather than later. So yeah, while this coaster isn't nearly as bad as some people say it is, I won't deny that it's still a very painful ride, and I would love to see it get replaced with something much better.
Disappointment in the game of life!
Dang, Ryan, I know you've been gone for a few years, but not only is Ninja only at number 9, but Coast Rider only at number 8 as well? I mean, good God, what's gotten into you? Well, truth be told, I have ridden Coast Rider since I made that video claiming it was the worst coaster ever, and I realized I was a bit too harsh. Well, slightly. I'll still never forgive this ride for replacing Perilous Plunge, and it's still not good. But it's not completely awful. It's like a 2 out of 10 ride. While the shin guards do suck, if you're able to get some room to make the pain slightly more tolerable, it makes this ride somewhat bearable. And also, this ride isn't nearly as painful as some of the other coasters that I've ridden. There's no headbanging or jackhammering on this ride. It's more or less just very uncomfortable and boring. Not only do the shin guards suck, but the ride is very trimmed, so that greatly hurts the coaster for me. And while this ride definitely isn't good, at the end of the day, it's just a family coaster at a mock Wild Mouse. So it's not like there was any potential to be had with this ride, whereas the 7 coasters above this ride had a lot more potential to be good.
Disappointment in the game of life!
Alright everyone, now it's time for arguably one of my greatest foes ever, the Vekoma Boomerang model. Since I deleted my channel, I had the dishonor of riding 3 more of them, whereas before I only rode the Knott's Berry Farm version of the ride. And well, let's just say I've only ridden the others once. Now, not every boomerang I've ridden is on here, as the only 2 downright awful ones that I do count for this list are the ones with the aerodynamics trains. More specifically, Boomerang at Knott's Berry Farm and Boomerang at Six Flags St. Louis. Welcome back, by the way, to the list, Six Flags St. Louis. I've also ridden the one at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom and Worlds of Fun. And while they're definitely not great rides, they're not bad enough to be on this list. Anyways, so people like these rides now, and I sorta get the appeal. They do admittedly have fun drops, and they are intense, so I sort of get where people are coming from. But to me, what kills this ride model is the fact that as rough as these are, going backwards while getting headbanged and getting jolted around is a downright nauseating experience. Especially the Six Flags St. Louis Boomerang, that thing was brutal. So yeah, I didn't like these rides. I want them all exterminated.
Disappointment in the game of life!
Now, this one is the coaster that I'm the least familiar with. This is the Big Apple coaster in Las Vegas. I last rode this thing all the way back in 2008. I remember being excited to visit the NASCAR Cafe on my first Las Vegas trip back in 2008, but it was closed and I was sad. So my parents took me to ride Big Apple instead. It's been so long since I hardly remember the ride. All I remember is pain. Lots of pain, lots of screaming and crying by the time I got off. Now, this ride's gotten new trains by Premier Rides, which should make the ride better, but in 2008, it was terrible.
Disappointment in the game of life!
This next one is gonna be one of my most controversial picks for this list. And this is one that I'm sad to say is on this list because I was very excited for it. This is Blue Streak at Cedar Point. Now, I understand that this is a classic wooden coaster from the 1940s, and I can respect it from that aspect, but man, this was one of the most brutal ride experiences I've ever had. It was non-stop jackhammering from start to finish. The airtime hills beat me up, and while I typically love laterals, on this ride, they were painful. It was so bad that I almost wanted to give this a 1 out of 10 because of how awful it was. However, the intensity and the fact that it is a historic wooden coaster does make this a 2 out of 10 ride, but it was close to that 1 out of 10 status, which is where the worst of the worst coasters reside. I just hope that I rode this on a bad day, or that Cedar Point is able to give this some sort of track work, because this thing nearly broke my spine. But I mean, hey, at least it looks pretty.
Disappointment in the game of life!
Oh boy, this is where the rides start to get bad. While I don't like some of the previous coasters on this list, at the very least they had some redeeming qualities to them. These 4 are dreadful, and this ride is just the tip of the iceberg. These rides are so bad that not only do they get a 1 out of 10, but F tier doesn't describe how bad they are. These coasters belong in G tier. Coming up, we have the Grizzly at California's Great America. Now, this coaster is unique compared to the others on this list. While most coasters on this list are bad because they're rough or painful, Grizzly isn't like that at all. This coaster is on this list because it actively made me want to quit being an enthusiast and made me feel like I wasted my time. Why? Because this ride is so dull. I mean, good lord, there is nothing to this coaster. There's no airtime, there's no laterals, just slow turns and shallow drops. I'd almost call this a family coaster, but that would be an insult to all the good family coasters that I've ridden that were so much better than this. I know not every coaster is gonna be good, but at the very least I want to remember something of it. Whereas with Grizzly, I felt absolutely nothing riding this ride. I just felt hollow and empty. Now, I gotta be honest, part of me wanted to put this atrocity as my least favorite coaster because it's just a waste of time. It takes forever to get on because of how slow the loading process is, and when you do get on, it's one of the most boring coasters imaginable. However, the actual bottom three angers me so much more because they had a lot more potential than this Snorefest, which is why Grizzly is only at number 4.
Disappointment in the game of life.
Six Flags St. Louis returns for its 3rd appearance on this list. Good job. Not really. Now, just to be clear, I have nothing against Six Flags St. Louis. It's a fun park that I'm looking forward to revisiting in 2 weeks. But man, do they have some bad rides. And unfortunately, this Woody was the most miserable, dreadful, horrific wooden roller coaster I have ever ridden. And it has one of the most dreadful experiences I've had on any coaster. I am talking about the boss. Now, this will upset so many people. It'll make people rage like crazy as this coaster has a huge cult following. I mean, you mean to tell me that you thought that the boss was worse than the Grizzly? Yes. Yes, I genuinely believe that. I don't know how you can enjoy this atrocity of a creation, but you do you. I'll just ride Mr. Freeze in the meantime. Seriously though, this thing was so freaking rough and painful that it managed to not only bruise my leg, but also give me back pain and a migraine for the rest of the day. The jackhammering was non-stop and relentless, and it just wouldn't freaking end. I rode the boss twice. First in the back, which is when I actually managed to get injured from how painful it was. And yeah, I had to take a break from riding stuff for a while because of that. I later in the day rode it again in the fronts because my friends convinced me to. Was it better? I mean, yeah, anything was better than that back row ride. Was it good? No, it was still the worst coaster I rode in 2024 and it wasn't even close. It just baffles me how poorly maintained this ride is. And yeah, I know this coaster is getting retracked by GCI, and I'm sure it'll be better this year. I mean, I love just about every other CCI coaster that I've ridden. I'm gonna find out in 2 weeks or whenever I upload this video. But in 2024, this was one of the worst things ever. If you did not ride Boss the same day I did, if you weren't on the same train I was, then you don't get to refute my points. You weren't there. However, as much as I hated the Boss, there are 2 coasters that are even worse than it.
Disappointment in the game of life.
Now, my friends, we have entered the Valley of the Damned. As I said, there are 2 coasters I hate even more than the Boss. And this was a relatively hard list to make. It was difficult to order this list. However, I knew going in, before I even thought of the script for this video, that these 2 would be the bottom 2 spots. I knew nothing would compare to these 2 atrocities. These 2 coasters are the worst things I have ever experienced, and it's not even close. So without further ado, the runner-up for the worst coaster I have ever ridden is Green Lantern First Flight. Now, I love Intamin to death. I really do. They're responsible for some of my favorite coasters of all time. Green Lantern is not one of those coasters. This coaster was created by the devil himself. I refuse to believe that Intamin, the creators of Maverick at Cedar Point, also made this ride. It's just not possible. This coaster is a terrible concept with even worse execution. It's painful, it's not fun, and it's just a miserable experience. It's often considered by many to be the worst coaster ever created, which is why this would be the perfect coaster to have as my least favorite coaster of all time. The perfect coaster to complete this horrible, horrible ranking. But no, it's not. There's one more coaster even worse than Green Lantern.
Disappointment in the game of life.
Friends, gather around the campfire for this one. Yes, like I said, there is a coaster I dislike more than Green Lantern First Flight. And while you may have assumed I had a hard time choosing between this coaster and Green Lantern, I gotta be honest, this wasn't even a contest. Even with Green Lantern, I knew that nothing else was going to take the bottom spot. Not to say Green Lantern is good in any way, because it was the previous worst coaster that I've ever ridden. However, I can give it this one thing. There is one thing that Green Lantern has that the number one spot doesn't. It was a unique coaster. It was the only one of its kind in America. And it's also defunct, so it can't haunt me anymore. You cannot say this about the actual number one spot. Not only is it still open, but you can find it everywhere. This is the most depraved abomination of a coaster that has ever been created. A vile creation that is so bad that I don't even think Jeed's here accurately describes my feelings towards it. This ride belongs in H tier. This is the only coaster that I have ridden that I would give a 0 out of 10 score to. Of course, I am speaking about the one, the only, Vekoma SLC. Most specifically, Kong at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom. Like I said, this was one of the easiest decisions of my entire life. As soon as I got off this ride, I knew that this was the worst thing I'd ever ridden. I was stunned at horror at what I just experienced. The headbanging was non-stop. The train jolted me around like crazy from how rough the ride is. Let me put it into perspective. Even the slow-moving turn into the station had a painful jolt. That is how bad this coaster is. This ride was so painful, it gave me a migraine that lasted for 6 hours after I rode it. 6 freaking hours. Not even Green Lantern hurt me that badly. This coaster is so bad that I genuinely, wholeheartedly never want to ride it again. I don't care if it's the only coaster left on the planet, I am never riding Kong again. I will throw a party the day this piece of garbage gets scrapped. I also hate Boss and Green Lantern, but those rides at the very least were failed but earnest attempts at making a good coaster. But this? I refuse there was ever any intentions of making this ride good. It's just not possible. And that is why Kong is by far the worst coaster I have ever ridden. So yeah, that's the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to like and subscribe to help this new channel take off. I'm sorry the channel started off with a rather negative video, but honestly, I just wanted to get this out before I get back to Six Flags St. Louis, because there's a chance this list will be very outdated after I go, because the boss could end up being a 10 out of 10 ride for all I know. Once that's done though, I'm going to start focusing on making more positive videos, maybe some theme park rankings or review, and of course, I'm open to suggestions. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and have a good one. Twisted Coaster Fan, out.